The latest development in the ongoing kerfuffle between the US government and Huawei is the sale of Honor. Honor used to be a separate brand, but very much part of Huawei, and now it's not. So what does that mean? Will future Honor phones now be able to use Google services? What about existing phones? Well, there's no single clear answer, and there is a lot to dig into with this topic. So stick with us, subscribe so you don't miss future Android Central videos, and we'll jump in. So this most recent news about Honor being sold follows the Honor brand itself being spun off into a separate legal entity back in April. The new company, Honor Terminal, was presumably created to make it easier to detach from Huawei once they found a buyer. That buyer is Shenzhen Zhixin New Technology Company, a new organization set up by various Chinese state-owned companies in partnership with Honor dealers in China. It hasn't been confirmed exactly how much money changed hands, but previous reports put the figure around $15 billion US. That means that post-Huawei exit, former parent company Huawei will no longer hold any shares in Honor Terminal, which you'd think would mean Honor's phones would be free from the restrictions currently crippling Huawei's smartphone business due to the fact that it's on the US Commerce Department's entity list. Those restrictions mean that, among other things, Huawei can't use Google services on its phones, which is a problem because a lot of people in the West view an Android phone without GMS as being at best severely disadvantaged and at worst a paperweight. So what about the prospects for the new Honor? Well, I'm not a lawyer and we are about to get into speculative territory here, but it probably depends on to what extent it's disentangled itself from Huawei. Because although Huawei might not own Honor anymore, up until now Huawei has designed and manufactured every Honor smartphone. They get designed by the same people who designed the P and Mate series phones for Huawei, come out of Huawei factories, and Huawei handles after-sales support. Presumably, if there is still a commercial relationship between Huawei and Honor, the US would take issue with that, especially if it involved what it viewed as US technology, which includes Google services, and especially since this new parent company is very openly funded in part by the Chinese state. That would make updating old Honor phones with GMS under this new company pretty tricky, to the point where Honor might just want to start afresh. We've asked Honor for comment on all these issues and they haven't been able to give us anything yet, understandable as it's still early days. But if you ask me if this sale would suddenly fix everything for existing Honor phones and allow them to magically get Google services, my answer would be probably no. If Honor wants to start afresh for future phones, and really it needs to if it wants to sell those phones in the West, then it needs to recreate by itself all the things Huawei was doing for it previously. So we're talking designers, R&D, supply chain, manufacturing. Now, already being in Shenzhen, the smartphone manufacturing capital of the world, and having all of Honor's employees on board makes that easier for Honor compared to your average new smartphone startup, but it's still a big challenge, especially when you're looking at things like customer support in many countries around the world. There's also the more fundamental question of what Honor even is without Huawei. The Huawei technology was a lot of the secret sauce for Honor phones, so without Kirin processors and Huawei's networking know-how, Honor could basically be in the same position as any new entrant into the industry. Sure, Honor has its brand and its people, but they'll be using the same off-the-shelf components as everyone else, and in a lot of other respects they'll be starting from scratch. Think software for instance. A year from now, I wouldn't expect the current Magic UI, basically a fork of Huawei's EMUI, to look anything like it does now. I'd instead expect it to be rebuilt from the ground up. But ultimately, if it goes down the road of building out its design and hiring manufacturing capacity from say Foxconn or whoever, Honor should, in future, be able to sell new phones with Google services in the West. The other possibility is Honor stays more closely connected to Huawei, and new phones instead ship with more familiar software and Huawei mobile services. I think that's unlikely, it would kind of defeat the whole point of spinning the company off in the first place. Even if it was able to get away with this without getting itself put on the entity list, it's going to face the same uphill struggle as Huawei building out their app ecosystem anywhere that's not China. Software aside, a big benefit for the newly independent Honor will be access to silicon. Let's go on a bit of a mini tangent real quick. Because of its place on the entity list, Huawei is restricted from doing business with TSMC, which manufactures its Kirin processors. It can now buy Snapdragon chips from Qualcomm, according to a license that was recently granted, but only 4G chips. That means they're looking at best at an almost year-old Snapdragon 865, assuming Qualcomm will sell that without the 5G modem. If not, they'd be looking at an 855, which is almost 2 years old. Either way, it's not much use to Huawei's phone business anyway, considering carriers likely won't range any 4G phones in 2021 outside of super cheap bargain bin models. So the whole Qualcomm licensing thing is kind of just an extended middle finger to Huawei. And were it still part of Huawei, or even seen to be just a front for Huawei, Honor would likely face those same restrictions itself. Bottom line is Huawei still has a lot of difficulties, and I wouldn't expect that situation to change quickly, even with an imminent Biden presidency. As far as Honor is concerned, going forward, and if they're sufficiently disconnected from Huawei, then yeah, they could absolutely build new phones with Google services and 5G Qualcomm chips, just like any other company. However things pan out though, this is certainly going to be interesting to watch. That's going to wrap up this one. Let us know what you think about the prospects for a newly independent Honor down in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.